So today I'll start with anatomy and physiology of lens. So coming to lens, what is lens? Still on fast. In general, what is a lens? In physics you might have learned. What do you mean by lens? No idea, lens? Many of you are wearing your lenses, glasses. Never ever used lenses or heard of lenses? You don't want to answer? Forgot about physics, joined MBBS. So lens is a transparent structure, okay? The main purpose of lens is transparency, okay? No need to note down or write the points. Everything is in your books. I'll just brief about anatomy and physiology. Just listen, okay? Concentrate first. Because lens is an important topic in ophthalmology. You get a long case, you get a short cases, okay? You get a long essay also, short notes also. So it's a transparent structure, and in our eye we have a biconvex lens, okay? It's a crystalline structure. So where the lens is positioned. So this is the cross section of the eyeball. The yellow part, what you are seeing is the lens, okay? This part is the lens, and anterior to it, that violet color coated line is there, right? Surface, that is the cornea, okay? And the rest of the white structure, outer line is the sclera, okay? This is the outermost part of the eye, okay? Next comes that red color zone which is present in front of the lens. You can see, right? That is uveal structure, and it consists of iris, ciliary body, and the yellow portion behind is the choroid. All three structures together form the vascular coat of the eyeball, okay? And the purple one and the white part surrounding is the fibrous coat of the eyeball, okay? And now comes the inner sensory part. Just below the yellow portion you will have the retina, okay? That is the nervous tissue, okay? And this yellow biconvex structure what you are seeing is the lens. So lens is placed behind the iris, okay? And in front of this green cavity, entire thing is the posterior segment, and it is filled with vitreous body, okay? So lens is placed behind the iris and in front of the vitreous, okay? And there is a space called patellar fossa. In that fossa, the lens is suspended. How it is suspended? It is supported from the ciliary body. This is the ciliary body, okay? This part is the iris, this is the ciliary body, and you can see fine fibers connecting from the ciliary body to the lens. That is the ciliary zone. So it is located behind the iris and in front of the vitreous cavity, and that is the patellar fossa. So there is a small space behind the lens, between the lens and the vitreous cavity. That space is known as space of Berger, okay? And the lens is connected to the vitreous cavity by a small ligament known as Weger's ligament, okay? These names just you remember, nothing much importance is there. And there is a Clockett's canal. You can see the pink canal that is not present in the adult or after birth. Just before birth, you will have that Clockett's canal. Lens will be getting nutrition from the choroid through the vessels which are present in the Clockett's canal. Once fetus is delivered, this Clockett's canal disintegrates, disappears, and lens becomes an avascular structure, okay? Cornea and the lens together form the important structures for the refraction of the eyeball, okay? What is refraction? When you are seeing some object or when a light is falling on your eye, that has to be focused on the retina. Then only you can see the image. okay, or you can see the light, okay. For that refraction to happen, to image to be formed on the retina, lens and the cornea are the important structures for the refraction, okay. Lens contributes around 35% of the refraction and cornea contributes around 65% of the refraction. So these two structures should be always maintained in a transparent state. So that's why these two structures will be avascular. Okay, remember that thing. Whenever there becomes any vascularization of the cornea or any disturbance in the lens metabolism, they become opaque. They don't maintain their transparency. And once they become opaque, vision falls down. Okay? Whatever may be the physical trauma, chemical injury, whatever may be the breach. So always these two structures should be maintained in a transparent state. So coming to dimensions of the lens, the equatorial diameter. What is the equator? The circular portion. See, this is a cross-sectional image. Lens is not like this. So lens will be a spherical only. The surrounding border of the lens we call it as equator. Okay, the equatorial diameter is around 9 to 10 mm, and lens is the only structure in the entire body which grows throughout life. Okay, it will be keep on growing. Growing means not like bigger like our limbs or something. Okay, it will be increasing in its size, both axial length in thickness, but not much in the diameter. Okay, mainly in its thickness. So during birth it is approximately 6.5 mm diameter and it attains maximum size by the second decade, that is during adulthood. So diameter it won't increase much, whereas anterior-posterior diameter, that is axial length or thickness of the lens keep on changing because new fibers will be developing. Lens is an active structure. Actively it is producing new fibers, so it will be increasing in its thickness. So poles of the lens. What are the poles of the lens? So as you see in the previous picture, the anterior tip of the lens and the posterior in the center here. Here we call it as anterior pole and posterior pole. Okay? Those two points are the anterior and posterior poles. Those points are important both surgically and clinically. And the refractive index of the lens. Each lens, any lens, not only the lens in the eyeball, any lens you take, it has some amount of refractive index. What is refractive index? You have some formula also how to calculate the refractive index. We compare it with the refractive index of the air, right? How much the light rays are refracting in this substance compared to the light rays refracting in the air, right? So lens also has some amount of refractive index. So that refractive index is different. Lens has portions. Anterior most is surrounding superficial most is the capsule. Next lies the lens epithelium. Next lies the cortex. Next innermost portion is the nucleus. These are the four parts in the lens. Okay. So refractive index, the lens nucleus is the oldest part of the lens. Okay, that means it is present from the embryonal stage. So cortex is the recent, young fibers will be present. Just above it is the lens epithelium and over the covering the entire lens is the lens capsule. So refractive index in the nucleus it is high because that is the oldest portion. Okay. So it is around 1.42 whereas the cortex is 1.38, so at an average of 1.39. So refractive power of the lens is 16 to 17 diopters, that contributes to 35% of the refraction of the total eyeball. Okay, refractive power of cornea comes under 40 to 45 diopters. Okay. So accommodation, what is accommodation? Anyone knows? So suppose a person is seeing a distant object, something, a tree or something, okay? Suddenly if you bring some pencil or a book in front of him, he focuses it on the book, okay? The capacity of the lens to focus from distance to near immediately, okay? See, the distance differs, the rays will be different, okay? The rays falling from infinity are different, the rays falling from nearby are different. So, but finally they have to fall on the retina to form a clear image, and that image will be transferred to the brain to understand the things, right? So, for the focusing of the distance object and the near object, lens has to change its shape, okay? It has to accommodate, okay? It swells so that the diverging rays can be focused on the retina, okay? That capacity of the lens is known as accommodation, okay? So this accommodation will be very active at an younger age, in children especially. They can try to accommodate even very closer object also, okay? So at birth the accommodative power will be around 14 to 16 diopters. It gradually decreases with age. Around at 25 years it will be 7 to 8 diopters, and after 40 years it further decreases, 40 plus. So that's why you might have seen many of your fathers, uncles, everyone, after 45 years or 40 years they start having reading glasses, isn't it? Because the refractive power of the lens has decreased, accommodative power of the lens has decreased. So we add, okay, we give some addition because the natural lens is not able to accommodate. So we are giving an additional power, okay? So for the near objects to be seen clearly, it varies depending upon the age of the patient. We give different powers, okay? So this is one property of the natural lens or human crystalline lens, okay? It has a power of accommodation. As I told you, the lens parts are lens capsule, lens epithelium, lens cortex and the lens nucleus, okay? What is this capsule? Anything covering some structure. All the structures in our body have a protecting layer, right? Similarly, lens also has a protecting layer that is known as lens capsule. It is a thick membrane. It is also known as a basement membrane, and it is also transparent, okay? Even the capsule should be transparent for the light rays to fall on the retina. And it is composed of type 4 collagen, and as you can see in this picture, the lens capsule is variably thickened at some places it is very thin, okay? As you can see, this is the anterior and posterior portion of the lens, and these two are the equators, okay? This is the equatorial regions, and this is the anterior pole, and this is the posterior pole. So it is very thin at the posterior pole, okay? And it is thick just beside the anterior pole, and here also just beside the posterior pole. That area is known as pre-equatorial region. That is the thickest portion of the lens capsule. As the lens capsule is very thin posteriorly, it can be easily breached, okay? Any blunt trauma to the eye, any blow with a fist, any injury with a ball, okay, or something, blunt trauma, injury to the eye, the posterior pole is the first part to get injured, as it is the thinnest portion, okay? As soon as the posterior pole is weakened, so the lens capsule is breached, fluid enters into the eye. All the materials, whatever fluid, electrolytes, everything will enter the lens, and it loses its transparency, okay? That is known as traumatic cataract, okay? It could be any physical, mechanical, whatever. So that is the thinnest portion of the lens. And during surgery also, lens, once it gets opacified, we call it as cataract, okay? Any opacification of the lens or its capsule, either developmental or acquired, we call it as cataract, okay? So during cataract surgery also, when I deal with the cataract surgery, I will tell you, we have to maintain this posterior capsule. Okay, we remove the entire substance of the lens, the cataractous portion, but we have to maintain this posterior capsule that has to be placed intact. We should not injure the posterior capsule because we keep an artificial lens into this bag. Okay, we remove the entire contents of the lens. Okay, and we still maintain this posterior capsule intact. Okay, we make an opening in the anterior capsule, small opening, and we remove the entire contents of the lens and we place an intraocular lens into the eye. Okay, so for that purpose, this posterior capsule has to be maintained always intact. Okay, what is present behind the posterior capsule is the vitreous. Once the posterior capsule is breached, the vitreous comes out. Okay, or if the lens is still intact, like in trauma, blood trauma, what I told you, if the posterior capsule is breached, the vitreous enters into the lens substance and it changes its transparency maintained. Okay, avascularity maintained, whatever. Coming to lens epithelium, it is actually a cuboidal lining. Okay, cuboidal cells, and they don't have any tight junctions. And this is the lens epithelium, is the active portion of the lens. Okay, from the lens epithelium, and the epithelium is present just below the capsule all around in the embryonal stage. Okay, whereas as soon as after birth, only the anterior portion of the lens epithelium will be retained. The posterior lens epithelium will get disintegrated. Okay, only the anterior part of the lens will have the epithelium, and this epithelium will be, as I told, cuboidal cells, and they migrate from the anterior pole to the equatorial region. Okay, slowly by mitosis, and these migrated cells will produce lens fibers. Okay, they become elongated. Okay, and these lens fibers from the equatorial region, they enter into the lens substance. Okay, that forms the lens substance, that fibers. Okay, and those fibers should be arranged regularly to maintain the transparency. I'll show the pictures also. So once the lens epithelium grows, elongates and forms the lens fibers, it loses their cell organelles, nuclei, everything. Okay, and just only the fibrous structure will be maintained. So depending upon the age when the lens fibers are produced, we have different zones in the cortex and the nucleus. See, I told lens capsule, beneath that is the lens epithelium, and beneath that is the cortex and the nucleus. Okay, so cortex will be the newest most fibers which are produced from the lens epithelium. Just below it is the innermost is the nucleus. So those are the oldest fibers which are produced. Okay, and this is how the lens fibers are arranged. Okay, and that anterior portion and this is the posterior portion. These are the embryonal nucleus, innermost nucleus, how they are arranged. There is a nomenclature called Y-shaped arrangement of the fibers. And this is again the fibers, how they are arranged in the lens. See, in this picture, as you see, just beneath the capsule are the cuboidal cells, and they migrate to the pre-equatorial region, and from there they elongate. You can see the elongation of the cells, and they form the lens fibers in the center. That's how they migrate. As they form the lens fibers, they lose all the nucleus and the cell organelles and everything. So next comes the nucleus. This is the oldest fibers which are present. According to the stage when the lens fibers are entering into the nucleus, embryonal nucleus, fetal nucleus, infantile and adult. Okay, embryonal is the innermost portion of the nucleus, that is from 0 to 3 months of the gestation, And from 3 months of gestation to till birth, we call it as fetal nucleus. And next, from infantile nucleus is from birth to puberty. And next comes the adult nucleus or the cortex. So cortex will be the peripheral most part of the outside the adult nucleus. You can see in this picture. See anterior capsule, just below it is the epithelium. See posteriorly the epithelium is lost. This is after birth, lens structure. So innermost is the darkest yellow color is the embryonal nucleus. Just above it is the fetal nucleus. So that's how the nucleus is, and above the nucleus is the cortex. Okay, now you got an idea how the lens fibers will be arranged and the structures. So coming to ciliary zonules, as I told you in the first picture, these are the zonules coming from the ciliary body which hold the lens in position in the patellar fossa. Okay, these are microfibrils. They arise from the ciliary body and ciliary processes also. They are also transparent. They are made up of fibrillin. And there are 3 types of fibers according to their arrangement. I'll show you the picture. So this is the center white portion is the lens, and the brown color is the ciliary body. So that crisscross arranged are the ciliary zonules which are holding the lens in position. Okay. And in the cross-sectional image, you can see those fibers coming from the ciliary body and the processes and how they are arranging. See, few fibers are arranging from posterior portion of the ciliary body and going to the anterior lens capsule. And few coming from anteriorly and going to posterior, and few in the intermediate. That is the older classification of the ciliary zonules. And newer classification is like pars orbicularis, zonular lenses, a fork shape like that. But if you just remember the older thing, that is sufficient. Okay, how the lens is held in position by the fibers. This is in brief about anatomy, and coming to physiology of the lens. As I told you from the beginning, it is a transparent structure and it has to be maintained its transparency. So it is again it's an avascular structure. So it depends on the aqueous humor which is present in front of the lens, okay, and the vitreous body behind which is present on the metabolism, on the lens metabolism, as there is no blood supply to the lens. It is an avascular structure, okay. So coming to composition of the lens, it contains water 65%, protein 34%, and the rest of the 1% or 2% is the carbohydrates, lipids and everything, amino acids, glutathione, etc. Though water content is 65%, lens is always maintained in a dehydrated state. Okay? If it is in that state only, it will be transparent. If it is hydrated, any breach in the lens capsule and entry of the fluid into the lens will cause cataract. Okay? So protein content, lens is the highest organ. Lens is the organ which has the highest protein content. Okay, it has a soluble portion and insoluble proteins. Soluble proteins are also known as crystallins, and this forms the major portion of the protein in the lens. Insoluble proteins will composed of only albuminoid, and it is present in very lesser amount in the younger age. As the age progresses, as the cataract develops, the insoluble proteins will increase and the soluble portion amount of proteins will be decreased. And again, the soluble proteins, there are 3 different types. They are also known as crystalline proteins, and they are alpha, beta and gamma crystallines. Okay, insoluble portion is albuminoids. Just remember the names, that is sufficient. So from where the lens gets its proteins and it comes through the lens capsule only, okay, by different transport mechanisms. Okay, lens epithelium and the capsule also have different transport mechanisms: sodium potassium pump, calcium mediated pumps. Okay, and the carbohydrates which are present mainly in the lens are glucose, and fructose, and this comes 1/10 of the glucose comes from the aqueous, and some amount comes from the vitreous also. And lipid constitutes, carbohydrates and lipids constitutes around 1% of the lens biochemical portion. And this glutathione is an important protein which is produced mainly to maintain the lens transparency. Okay, so for that glutathione is present in the lens. Its amount is altered with the age, and it mainly contributes to the redox system of the lens microenvironment. And one more important chemical is ascorbic acid. It's present in the human lens around 30 milligrams. But it is also important for the lens transparency. Okay, but its precise role is not still established. So what are the metabolic activities happening in the lens? Mainly the glucose mechanism. It mainly happens by anaerobic metabolism, that is glycolysis, and whatever the amount of ATP generated, it is used for the production of proteins and glutathione, and for the ion transport mechanisms across the lens capsule and the epithelium. Okay, and to maintain the lens in a transparent state, dehydrated state. For these things, this ATP is used, most of the ATP. And whatever the lactose which is generated through glycolysis, it is diffused outside into the aqueous and vitreous. Okay, so these are the mechanisms of the glucose, and among these anaerobic glycolysis is the most important, happens in the lens. So as you can see in this table, glycolytic pathway, 80% of the glucose is utilized, and Krebs cycle and pentose, all those contributes to 5 to 15%. And all these pathways, you know. Coming to protein metabolism, these free amino acids are mainly actively transported into the lens through the aqueous, and from these amino acids, whatever the proteins required by the lens are produced. Most importantly are the soluble proteins, that is crystallines, which I have already told you. So when the lens is in a transparent state, all these crystalline proteins will be present. Once the lens is losing its protein synthesis capacity or something, the insoluble portion of the lens increases. Okay, and the lens starts losing its transparency. So what are the active transport mechanisms present in the lens or for the amino acids mainly? So whatever the energy produced by glycolysis pathway is utilized for the transport of amino acids, potassium and taurine, inositol, and for the extrusion of the sodium. Okay, and where it occurs is mainly at the capsule. And so this is how the contents of the aqueous and the lens and how they are exchanged. Okay, there is a sodium potassium pump, and how the sodium is extruded out and potassium is taken in, and how the glucose is taken in, lactose is sent out, and amino acids are taken in from the aqueous humor. How the exchange happens between the aqueous and the lens. And this is in detail about the transport mechanisms, active and passive transport. So this is how the lens transparency it loses. See, initially at an younger age, the lens will be like first and second after birth. Slowly as the age progresses, the central hardness increases or the insoluble portion of the proteins increases, and all other mechanisms start decreasing as the age grows, and that's how the lens loses its transparency and becomes hardened. So lens transparency is maintained by its avascular nature, single layer of the epithelial cells, and semi-permeable nature of the lens capsule, and tightly packing of the lens fibers, and a regular arrangement of the lens fibers, and the characteristic arrangement of the lens proteins also, and the pump mechanisms which are present in the lens fibers, and the auto-oxidation mechanism, that is glutathione. Okay, it should be always present in a reduced state, glutathione. This keeps the lens proteins also in the reduced state and maintains the integrity of the cells and also the pump mechanisms. Okay, and this is in brief about anatomy and physiology. Next class we go into the actual cataract. Okay, any doubts, anything?